Okay, well, good evening, everyone. Today is March 11th. It is 7:06, and we have a quorum present. So we will start the Warrant Committee meeting with a roll call.
Ed Vizella here.
Nelson present.
Bob Slaney present.
Steve Callahan present,
Peter Michelson present.
and Jill.
Jill Rafter participating remotely.
Okay, great.
And Pete Saladino participating remotely.
Okay, good evening, Pete. Thanks for joining. All right. Our yeah, let me just if I can share my.
I've got mine up, Steve.
Oh, you got yours up.
Yep.
Okay, great. Okay, excellent. So this is the actual agenda tonight. It's basically we have some minutes to approve. We're going to quickly talk about the calendar meeting responsibility, and the overlay discussion we'll have to defer to our next meeting because Yvonne is got the flu. So, but we will hear from Georgia on the investment accounts, and then we'll talk about free cash, and Frank did update the scorecard for the new proposed budget, and then we'll probably talk about some warrant articles for zoning, the senior and veterans exemption, and tax work-off articles. We're going to wait for Yvonne to do that next meeting. There is a discussion of the materials I sent around on potential tax levy impacts from major capital needs, and then we'll get committee update and town meeting update. So that is basically it. And so I guess we have two sets of minutes, the January 28th, which is Pete Saladino drafted up and sent around, and then the February 25th ones that Ed Vizella circulated. So are there any comments, questions? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve both sets of minutes, I guess.
Motion to approve the January 28th and February 25th meeting minutes.
Okay, there's
Second.
Okay, second, and let's go around, take a roll call.
Yay, Ed Vizella, yay.
Nelson, yes.
Bob Slaney, yes.
Steve Callahan, yes.
Peter Michelson, yes.
And Jill?
Jill Rafter, yes.
Pete Saladino, yes.
Okay, thank you. Great. Okay. The calendar is pretty much hasn't changed. Ashley was supposed to take minutes tonight, so I agreed to switch with her. So I'll do tonight's, and then she'll do next meeting. She'll switch with me next meeting. And I guess with that, we probably could go right into George's presentation. You want to come up here? You don't need to sit way back there. This should look familiar to everybody. I think the last couple of years we've looked at this. So Georgia, I'll let you
Okay,
take it
so
away.
the town has three different areas of investment. Tonight, we're focusing on the long-term investments, which are the trust funds. On the day-to-day side, we have our cash investments, which are utilized to pay our expenditures. And we also have our investment at Crit. So tonight, the trust fund summary, these are balances at the end of December. Trust funds are usually reconciled quarterly. The town utilizes an investment management company, Bartholomew and Company. They have 250 municipalities that they service. They are our investment partner. The town has used them. I've been treasurer for 24 years, so the town has used them for 24 years. They prepare our reports timely. Their due diligence is outstanding. And they offer conservative investment management. I don't know if you want me to go through all of the actual trust funds. They're pretty straightforward. I think the most important piece here is the appropriating authority. And that appropriating authority is the group that has the authority to vote the expenditure out of the trust fund. So we have our stabilization funds, which we've added a few during the year or the past few years. Some of these trust funds have restricted uses. Some of them have balances where we can only appropriate the investment portion in the fund. And a lot of times, the trust funds have trust fund documents where, especially if the money is given from an individual donor, they have specific uses that the town wants us to follow. Like, for example, the Catherine Bell one down the bottom, I think the fourth or fifth one from the bottom, the Catherine Bell Library Trust Fund. The library trustees are the appropriating authority. That one there can be used only in the children's library. For example, the Elizabeth Bosconi Trust, that was a school teacher that can only be used for expenses relating to science. So each one, and of course, over the years, I've pretty much memorized, the allowable expenses in each trust fund. I think the most important ones, at least on the town side, are the stabilization funds, especially the last few that we've added, the capital and the municipal. It obviously has allowed the town to use the funds in those trust funds to appropriate into the capital budget. And
I have a question for
sure.
you. Yeah, I don't believe you were here, but when we had a meeting, maybe a couple meetings ago, where Mo came and talked about the article on the cemetery,
Mhm.
and I noticed there's two accounts here, and there was some confusion at the meeting about, because they're going through a major expansion. The articles is to do a major expansion, and there was at least some confusion on my part about, the understanding was that a big part of it was going to be funded from one of these trust funds. And Andrew, maybe you know the answer to this.
So the trust funds that we have regarding the cemetery, that's a perpetual care.
Okay.
So that's for continual maintenance.
That's the one with the bigger balance. That's the one with the $1.5
And
million.
there's a secondary cemetery trust, that's a new one, which is the Vine Lake Cemetery Trust. We just got that a couple years ago. That's just for stuff for Vine Lake Cemetery.
That's 26,000.
Yes, that was gifted to the town of Medfield from.
It's from the Vine Lake Cemetery Preservation Trust. That is just for the historic section.
Yeah.
Of the Vine Lake.
And then, so the sale of lot revolving is what's used for the.
Oh, it's a revolving account, so it's not on this list. Oh, okay. And so the question was, I guess we weren't sure whether that had enough money in it to fund.
It does.
It does.
The revolving one.
The revolve.
It's, $726,000?
Someone's between 7 and 800,000.
Yeah, it's,
Okay.
I think last time I checked, it was a little over 726,000, and we anticipate the cost of this project to come in just under or just over 700,000 for the expansion.
Okay,
So we expect that to be fully covered from.
okay.
So the cemetery one, that 1.5 million, that one there, we are. The use out of that fund is to use the interest that is earned in that specific trust to offset the cemetery budget that gets appropriated on the town side. So that $30,000 credit that you see on the town budget,
Mhm.
that $30,000 comes out of that trust account of interest that is accumulated to offset the budget that is appropriated on the town side.
And how much so I guess, does it,
So the interest depends, it depends on when interest comes in on treasury notes. I have corporate bonds, I have CDs. Again, I reconcile them quarterly. Certain months I can have, like for the month of December, I haven't done March yet. The March has not been released yet. For the month of December, I had $375,000 of income that came in for the trust account. So again, they're all pooled and
right,
they all get a percentage of the
right,
interest.
but this particular account, it says the principal cannot be spent.
Correct, the
So how much
cemetery.
of the 1.5 million is principal versus accumulated interest?
We-
I have that information, but.
Yeah, we usually pull 30,000 a year, and I'd like to say we bring in about maybe, well, some years we don't bring it in. It depends. My treasury notes are getting low now. I don't have the high notes anymore. It depends on what's invested in it.
Well, maybe you can let us know, that's fine. I'm
I
just
would say
curious,
90% of that,
90% of the 1.5 million is principal.
I would say so, yes.
So if you can't spend the principal, it's gonna just, looks like it's just gonna continue to build. If we don't use all that.
It might be
interest.
helpful to separate it, right?
Yeah,
Like have an account just for principal and then accumulated interest, or compounded interest, I guess.
But I think Ed's question is, do we just let it grow? Is there anything?
Well, it sounds like the interest could be used just to offset cemetery expenses, right?
And we do that.
And we do that.
We do that.
Is there,
But-
are you creative in how you allocate expenses?
Cemetery budget is.
It goes into the cemetery budget.
Yeah, I know, but that's,
It's another available fund.
It's another
We're
financing
sharing
source.
okay.
revenue. Sharing revenue.
so the budget we saw was net of the 30,000.
No, it's in there.
It's in there. If you look at the town,
30,000 is carried in as a revenue.
But the 30,000 is a number. It could be more.
It's just direct expenses is what I'm saying. Like, is there an opportunity to allocate like we do with this, the enterprise fund offset?
So that is a question that we have been wrestling with. This is the second year of doing this revenue process, and there are several revolving funds and direct expenses like that we have to show on our side of the budget sheet as revenue, and then we share the 75-25 as revenue.
Oh, this is one of the,
this is one of them.
There's quite a few of them like that.
we have to put that on our list to revisit.
We have a list.
Okay,
But can the principal, let's call it 1.4 million or 1.2 million, whatever it is, it cannot ever be touched?
As of now, no.
As of now, no, but I am sure a town meeting vote would allow us to.
Oh, okay.
But it was,
Because I'm
But
just
again,
thinking
if you start,
Mo needs a new truck. Some part of the cost of the truck could be, we could say, oh yeah, he uses it to help maintain the cemetery, although he may use the truck for other purposes as well. It's just one expenditure that we could get from there.
I would think that this account it would be used for an expansion of the cemetery. I don't think it would be a capital expense. But I'm certain that town meeting vote would allow you to use the principal. But if you start eating away at your principal, you're also gonna get less interest and you won't be able to use it as another financing source to reduce your cemetery
Yeah.
budget.
that's why I suggest just tracking it separately and just to see if are we consistently underspending the interest that gets allocated every year, you know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
In which case, there might be an opportunity to look at allocations for other expenses, or I don't know, but,
I do track that on my side.
oh, okay.
And anecdotally, there was one year where we took out more than what we actually had.
Correct, yeah,
With that.
yeah.
You got in trouble, why?
Not
Oh.
really in trouble, but it's not something we should be doing.
If it's
We
interest,
punish ourselves.
So,
Well, you get to get the beats and you just hit yourself in the back. Is that what-
okay. All right, well, thanks.
So those are the biggest
Yeah.
ones. Obviously the cemetery one is the biggest one and, you know, the stabilization funds. And, you know, the other ones are, you know, scholarships and so on. Obviously, the trust fund mechanism is a long-term investment. You want to be able to invest the funds in here so that they can grow for a specific project.
Yeah,
The unemployment trust fund. How does that work?
So we are self-funded with the unemployment. So if somebody applies for unemployment and we have to pay for it, we pay for it out of the trust fund. So we are a direct reimbursement employer. We pay our unemployment expenses directly from the trust fund. And if you can recall on our budget, we usually appropriate from the general fund $40,000 or $50,000 to be invested in the trust fund.
And that's where you get the plus.
Yes, that's how we added,
So
yes.
basically, yeah. For the last
And
3
again,
years, the
that's also
expenses.
a piece that's shared by the town and the school, that unemployment trust. It's school employees and town employees.
who are the trust fund commissioners?
So the trust fund commissioners, per Mass General Law, only have the authority on the municipal building insurance trust fund.
Yeah.
And those trust fund commissioners are elected.
Oh, it's an elected
It's
position.
an elected position. However, they only govern the municipal building insurance trust fund.
That 300,000 or 300.
That 333,000, yes. And there is a Mass General Law for that. It has to be an extraordinary expense to a property or an asset of the town that had an extraordinary event to it.
When was the last
Loss.
time we used money out of that?
Last time we used money out of that was to fund a pickup truck for the park and rec.
Okay, I guess that was considered extraordinary at the time. And I'm sure we comply with all laws and regulations.
So that was the last time we used something.
Commission doesn't require unanimous, huh?
Actually, it was not a unanimous vote, I will say that.
How long ago was that? Is that like,
Let's see, COVID is 5 years. Has to be at least 8 to 10 years ago, I
Okay.
would say.
okay. But the something like a water leak in a building would not qualify?
It would qualify, but something like that, you're gonna be able to put that against your
Insurance,
insurance and
okay.
get a claim for it.
This is stuff that wouldn't be covered by insurance?
Yeah.
You know, the deduct-
And it's almost, you
Yeah.
know, sometimes it's smaller. It could be like a repair to a truck, like sometimes during a snowstorm. It's been a while since we've used something out of there. And again, if you look at the Mass General laws, they do list the specifics.
So that you can't use a deductible, insurance deductible as a,
I'm not sure if that's actually listed in there, but it has to be an extraordinary event
yeah,
for
okay.
the loss of the town's asset.
Okay. Okay, any other questions from anyone else?
If anybody has any other questions, please feel free to email me. I'm more than happy to answer your questions.
Thank you. This is,
Yeah, I appreciate the updates.
You're welcome. And I
Every year
appre-
you do a very great job.
and I appreciate you doing all the research on a lot of these ones that kind of are small and been around for a long time.
Yes, and so, and it's funny because a lot of times when the committees change and the boards change, they're not aware that these exist.
Yeah,
So it's always nice to inform everyone that the money is there.
Yeah, yeah.
All right,
Okay,
thank you.
great. Thank you. All right. Frank. You want to talk to us about the free cash and the scorecard?
Sure. So, I just threw up the proposed free cash appropriations for this year's town meeting up on the screen. I'm sharing it as well. So I think this is basically an updated version of the spreadsheet that we had used earlier in the fall. And we had broken it out into several different categories: fixed / primary, known and secondary, and then proposals for discussion. So I've kept those same categories. I should also add this little bit of noise over here on the right, is just the numbers I was using to ensure that we were in compliance with the new financial policy. And if you recall, the updates to the financial policy require us to keep 3% or an amount equivalent to 3% of our expenditures free cash on hand, as opposed to 2.5%. So just to run through them quickly, we have an OPEB contribution of $578,000. That's a 5% increase from last year's appropriation for the financial policy. The general stabilization fund deposit of $175,000. Capital stabilization fund deposit of $850,000. You'll notice at the bottom, happy to combine these two for future reference, but I just wanted to keep them separate for now for discussion purposes. There's an additional $190,000 that's deposited into the capital stabilization fund to fund the Metacomet tennis courts resurfacing. That project was recommended for funding by the capital budget committee pending approval of free cash or additional free cash deposit by the Warrant Committee and obviously ultimately by the town meeting. Danielson,
Will that be part of the one article for capital?
yes, that will be included in the non-buildings capital article.
Yep. Okay.
Danielson Pond, there are a number of things that need to happen down there in order for us to be in compliance with the state order that we have. So we set aside some funding for that. Last year, as most of you will recall, we set up the elementary school tax mitigation fund to hopefully blunt some of the impact of the tax implications of building an elementary school. This year's deposit is $900,000. School building committee feasibility study, an additional $400,000. That's on top of the $1.2 million that they have on hand.
1.1.
1.1, yeah. So this brings us, that brings us to 5, right?
What's next? So if we get down to proposals for discussion, actually, I think we do need to remove the economic development item. We did not include that in the warrant, so I think that one's going to fall off.
Okay.
Proposals for discussion. $25,000 to continue for environmental review at the Medfield State Hospital. So this is not the core campus that is part of the Trinity development. This is the overlook. If you're looking at the hospital from Hospital Road, is sort of towards the left and towards the back. This has been a project ongoing for a very long time. Lots of legal negotiations with the state and DCAM. So this will pay our legal fees related to that, or that environmental review. Conservation Land Trust, the Conservation Commission has requested $5,000 to put towards that fund. They can do things like capital projects for their properties, signage. If the balance were big enough, they could actually purchase land with that fund.
And they're coming in our next meeting to talk about the Danielson Pond and that concert, that $5,000.
And then, as I mentioned previously, the $190,000 additional appropriation into the capital stabilization fund, Comet tennis courts resurfacing. So that would get us to total appropriations from free cash at almost 3.2 million. We go back to the top, we have 5.6 available that's been certified by the state. The amount available for appropriation is what we are required to have on hand minus the total appropriation. So in theory, we could still spend 261,000 and be in compliant financial policy. Not that we should or need to, but that's just out there for
We don't have to.
No, I'm just putting it out there into the ether.
It's actually 276, right? Can you put the 15? back
True,
in?
true. Yeah, so it's 276. And then the remaining free cash.
That's for the warrant committee party.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Minutes are expensive. No, I'm just kidding.
Cash.
So the remaining free cash that we would have on hand would be 2.4.
That's the required policy amount.
Okay.
That's
So
that's
we're
the
really
3%.
gonna be at 2.7 roughly.
Yeah.
Yeah, the 261 plus the 2.4.
No,
No,
No, that's
that's
5.6 million, sorry, 5.62 at the very top.
right. Minus the 3,188,000
Yes,
is 261 available to spend.
that's, so the 5.6 minus the 3.1 is the 2.4 at the very bottom. And the 2.4 is 261,000 less than, or I guess it's 261,000.
more. In other words, the
We're
required,
We're at like 3.3%, something like that.
Yes,
yeah. So, well, he's gonna go through that. He's got the number for you, the next slide. Yes, that's exactly the case. Jill and Pete, do you have any comments or questions on the free cash?
No comments. Looks good.
Good, okay.
Well, I just have a question generally.
Likewise.
Yeah.
So you have, I'm sorry, Jill, go ahead.
I think, Jill,
Sorry,
do you have
no
a question?
questions. I just couldn't get off mute fast enough. Sorry.
Okay, all right.
But so looking at, like we talked about the capital stabilization requirements, I mean, some of those funds that were, if there's amounts available this year, is there any benefit in considering adding more to those just to build the balance with money that's available? I mean, we don't have to, but the thing is, we're looking at all these funds in each year.
Well, yeah, I mean, this isn't gonna make a difference to what, they got bigger problems than
Well,
a
of course,
couple hundred
I
thousand,
mean,
but.
no,
But I think of course, it's all, you could always allocate that 260 to anything, we want to, but that could be done at any time.
Right.
It doesn't need to be done now. You know what I'm saying? It stays in free cash. It can
Right.
always.
Nice to have that cushion
We have a little
going
cushion there,
into the
right?
next
Yeah,
year.
yeah. I mean, we might need it next year for something.
Right.
okay.
Okay. Go ahead. Scorecard.
so moving on to the scorecard, and I apologize, I did, it's an updated one.
Yep.
Thanks. So these are the different metrics that are laid out in the updated financial policy. And so what,
Let me just make a general comment. So there was a discussion and I gave them some guidance. I said, if you remember, we changed the policy, financial policies sort of mid-year, right after the 25 budget was developed.
Oh,
Okay. So the question was, well, should we try to show the 25 budget against the old financial policies or the new ones? And I thought that it would be much clearer and much easier to understand if they did it with the new financial policies. And then there's a footnote for the one that doesn't comply with the new financial policy to explain, at the time the budget was adopted, it was in compliance. But everything else is in compliance. So anyway, I just wanted to point that out. But go ahead, Frank.
so these are the various metrics that are set out in the updated financial policy. As Steve mentioned, we did both the fiscal year 2025 actual budget and then the fiscal year 2026 as proposed currently. That 15,000 will come out of the free cash balance. I don't suspect these numbers will change.
By the way, you probably should change that, on the very first one, you should call that the Warrant Committee Reserve. Right?
Yep.
We changed that.
Speaking of that one looks a bit odd because it's the same number. It's 0.23% for both years. But because 170,000 is such a small percentage of 76 some odd million, you take the decimal point out like 3 or 4 spots, it eventually changes, but we've seen double for a while. So feel free to question that. So these are the different metrics that we use for the financial policy. You'll notice that the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the 6th one down, the balance in the special education reserve metric, where we want to keep less than 2% of annual net school spending in the fund. We're not anywhere close to that, but that one is in italics because that figure has not yet been updated since last year's budget process. Michael LaFrancesca let me know that once the fiscal year 2026 budget is finalized, you can get me an estimated number for fiscal 26. But I don't think we're really in danger of breaking that 2% threshold anytime soon. I'm happy to take any questions individually on these. I can walk through the different calculations. I'm not sure how much detail you want to go into any of these.
So on the third one down, that's the 3% policy. It was 2.5.
Oh,
So-
yes.
So there's a footnote that talks about that.
So we're
So even though 25 is 265, is less than the 3, it was in compliance with the prior policy. And, I think, the general stabilization fund is going up slightly. So is the overall reserves of the town increasing from 822 to 9%. And the debt's going in the right direction, although we'll talk about that.
Will this be published in the printout in the warrant? It goes out.
So I think
A form of this,
yeah.
probably, yeah.
In prior years, we had done the old test, included it in the review of town finances in the warrant, so we'll figure out a new way to do it with this update.
Yeah.
I think it sends a good message.
And so, just for clarification, when these metrics mentioned general, excuse me, what's the term that we use for reserves?
The general reserve account?
General reserve accounts, thank you, Steve. That includes the $170,000 of the warrant committee reserve, the general stabilization fund balance. And so for fiscal year 26, that includes the projected $175,000 deposit and the free cash. So for fiscal year 25, that would be our free cash after the appropriations we made at town meeting in May of 2024. And for fiscal year 26, that is basically the number that we project to have on hand after we spend it. At town meeting in May 2025, pending town meeting approval.
Yeah. Any questions, Jill or Pete?
I think this is really clear. I like this.
I think does it make sense? I know it's a great schedule, just to put the dollars in.
Yeah, I can do that too. I have
Just so you see that all the dollars and what.
yeah, absolutely. I'm happy
The
to.
dollars beside each one of these.
Yeah.
bullets.
I have you can
Well, it's not their ratio, so you'd have to put both.
I can
Well, the range in some cases, yeah,
so this
the
spreadsheet
range like on the first one.
this spreadsheet basically links to 2 other tabs. You know me, I love spreadsheets. So
Oh, yeah.
I have it linked in another spreadsheet that basically has all the individual
Right.
data points that is being used to calculate the percentages. So I can send that to you and see if there's a
That
different
just-
way that
yeah.
you want to show.
Maybe you don't need to put like the general fund operating budget expenditure 7 times. You just do the numerator. Or, for each, like same with revenues, you do the numerator, or something like that. I mean, you take a look at it,
Yeah.
see what you can do.
We want to make it as clear and concise for the warrant as possible. So
Yeah.
Do we have also it detailed somewhere or like as a reference, like what each account could be used for?
That's in the financial policy.
Okay, so it has a list of
Yeah,
accounts
yeah,
and their definitions. Okay.
yeah, yeah, especially all the stabilization account, special purpose stabilization.
Right.
account. That's
Yeah,
all.
okay. I think that would be something good to reference people in case they have questions, but
Yeah, maybe a footnote with a link or something to the, that's on the website, right? The
Yes.
financial policy, yeah,
yeah, okay.
good idea. All right. Anything else on that?
This is great.
Okay.
Thanks for your work.
Thank
here.
Appreciate it. All right. Moving right along here, why don't we talk about zoning? Maria,
Why not?
come talk to us about all these wonderful schedules and presentations you put together.
A complete 180. Very, very few numbers.
No numbers, a lot of words, right?
Yes, yes.
Are you gonna drive for her or?
Yes, please. Thank you. Pulling up my presentations here as well. Do you want to do the FEMA one first?
Good. Awesome.
Is FEMA the floodplain?
Yes. You're fine. Thank you for having me. I will be presenting tonight on two mandatory updates to our zoning bylaws. The first one is a floodplain zoning. This is going to be a complete rewrite, which I was told is called a restatement in legal terms. So this is can you go to the next slide? This is to comply with some of the new requirements that FEMA has issued. So FEMA is requiring that the update of our bylaw is a necessary part of the process to stay in compliance with the National Flood Insurance Program. Without it, homeowners could lose access to some flood insurance or flood reimbursements or face higher costs. The town could also lose federal disaster aid and recovery funds if this doesn't get updated. Updating the bylaw protects homes. It keeps insurance rates affordable or as affordable as they're going to get. And it ensures compliance with FEMA regulations. We need to take action to keep Medfield safe and prepare for future floods, especially, where there's been a turn towards looking at climate resiliency in the past few years. And this is a draft that has been approved by DCR, and it's largely the same as their FEMA model bylaw. I've changed very little. I've just taken out things that are non-applicable. The planning board has taken an initial look at this, as has the zoning board of appeals. They've had some initial questions, which I brought to my contact at DCR, and I've asked to take out some redundancies, and they said, no, you cannot touch it. So we have very little control. And just to give you some kind of expanding on that NFIP program, the NFIP, which is a National Flood Insurance Program, sets minimum floodplain management standards in 44 CFR Part 60.3. Communities that participate in the NFIP have to adopt regulations that meet or exceed these standards. If the community's regulations do not incorporate the latest firm data, which are like the little map panels, and any additional requirements that FEMA has established, then the community risks suspension from the NFIP. And if we lose eligibility from this program, then residents could become ineligible for federally backed flood insurance. There's basically like a little checklist. If you do things that address climate resiliency, then you get your residents get little discounts, like 5% off, and you can accumulate those up to a certain percentage. So it doesn't necessarily affect the town budget, but it affects how residents experience disaster relief.
Is this specific to people who are in flood areas?
Yes. Yes, and that you would need to have a structure that is touching the flood map, and I have an
She has
example of the
a
map.
GIS map. So,
Next one. So this is a summary of the bylaw. The bylaw protects people from property and property from flood damage in Medfield high-risk areas. Special permits are needed for most construction or land changes in flood zones. The buildings have to follow strict flood protection standards. This is a change in the building code, so that's also the state passed it non-negotiable. If you're doing significant renovations or significant work in the floodplain, there's very strict criteria you need to adhere to make sure that if anything like floods, then your house is able to pass the water, and like no electrical sockets like on super ground level, things like that. The town has to follow FEMA guidelines and report any major floodplain changes. If someone gets a variance, and that's a variance that the state would issue a variance, we cannot issue these reliefs as these are state laws, then they will be warned about higher flood insurance costs by the state, and will also get notified if anyone gets given a variance process. And this bylaw does not override state building codes, but it just ensures that there's stricter flood safety rules that will be applied as needed. Next. So the purpose of the bylaw is it's meant to protect people and property from flooding in Medfield, especially in areas that are near the Charles and the Stop River. It maintains a natural ability of floodplains to store water and to control floods. It prevents problems like sewage leaks, power outages, and dangerous conditions caused by flooding. And it reduces the cost of emergency response and property damage due to flooding. So this is a sample flood map. FEMA has an interactive website that you can go into, and you type in your address, and it takes you to like zoom and map. That address you see there is Town Hall, and I zoom out so you can see some sample areas. So the floodplain district includes all high-risk flood areas in Medfield that are identified by FEMA. And the exact boundaries are based on FEMA's flood insurance rate map and flood insurance study, both which are effective as of July 8th of 2025. And in that little map, you're gonna see some like light blue. That is zone A, B, and A99. All of these zones have different meanings. What you need to know is that blue is bad.
blue's bad,
Blue,
okay,
yes.
all right.
And then
Whether it's light or dark blue, it's bad. Got it,
yeah,
okay,
Water.
all right,
yeah, it's basically water.
all right.
That's the areas that are very prone to flooding. And there is the orange areas are areas that we don't regulate. They're not great, but they're not bad enough for us to have regulations. And that's how FEMA defines it. There's more specific definitions that are in the bylaw. I'm happy to go over any specific questions, but that's the gist of it. This just aligns us with the new state building code requirements, and just make sure you're not changing the area significantly if you're not, making flood areas worse for yourself or for your neighbors.
Where's the Stop River? I assume in the bottom left, that's the Charles.
I don't think it's on here. I think that it's like, it should be down in the left, or the bottom left somewhere. But I think this doesn't go that far down.
No, this is just the area near Town Hall. So it's down further, it's like Noon Hill missing.
So here's a question for you. So this little orange or brown, whatever your color it is, at the top, it kind of goes like this. Where is that over? It's right above the limit. It says limit of.
Yeah, let me
I'm just curious because I think I live over there. So
Yeah,
see.
I think that's Rocky Ridge.
is that Rocky Woods?
I think so.
Or is that the pork factory across the street from that?
That's okay. If you don't know, that's fine. I thought you knew, but that's okay.
Is
That
the,
gets very.
It's down by, I think it's down by
is
Petters.
the jurisdiction primarily federal or state?
There's some basic federal guidelines. I think the state went above and beyond a little bit. So we have to confirm with the states, which are federal with us. And it's enforced by DCR locally. So if that's Town Hall, It's honestly like a couple blocks towards.
Oh, it's pretty close to town hall.
Yes.
So it's not way up the other end of 109.
No, it's like 3 or 4 blocks from here.
Oh, okay, okay.
I'll see if I can like drop.
Okay, I can sleep tonight.
If you wanna give me your address, I'll look it up.
See a house there.
But there's actually very few properties that are built on the blue areas. Montrose is one of them. Like there's a tiny part of one of Montrose's buildings that just touches a
Okay,
little corner of it. And if you were to do a major renovation to a building that overlaps the zone, major renovation being like 50% of the value of the structure, not the value of the
Yeah.
land and the structure, then you would need to like put your house up on stilts and no utilities on like the basement then.
yeah,
Hmm.
okay.
Fun
So,
fact.
maybe you're gonna get to this, but, for town meeting, will the zoning board be presenting this or
It'll be the planning board.
planning board, sorry, okay, planning board? Will they have a presentation?
I have version 2 of the presentation that goes through.
The moderator is allowing presentation? for
If the
this?
moderator allows it.
So the planning board has to make a report,
Okay,
so they're gonna make the report.
okay,
And I have this is a lot of jargon. I have a much simpler PowerPoint that's a little longer than the one here too.
okay.
If you want in more detail, I am able to provide that too.
So the Article 10 is quite a few pages. This will all be printed in the warrant. Okay, and then what about the point by point explanation? Is that gonna be in the warrant too, or just the actual article?
There'll be an article and an explanation written.
Okay. Has the planning board voted on?
No, we're holding a hearing on this on March 24th. That's our definitive hearing. For now, we have a joint meeting with the zoning board next week. Because a lot of this falls on the zoning board to enforce. Even though it's a
Okay.
planning board sponsored article.
Okay,
So there will not be a vote until the end of March, and the planning chair and I will be here on April 1st to discuss the results of that vote and give you any updates as needed.
Is there anything in this that would be controversial or could cause
I don't
under
think
normal
so.
circumstances? I know.
We currently have a flood zone bylaw, and it's not great. I think that what we have right now is worse. This would be better for, I think, every resident. And most of the things that residents are not thrilled about is actually in the building code.
Yeah.
Not in the zoning.
yeah, and the fact that there's very few properties that this impacts in town, and
Yes.
if you don't do it and you have a property that it impacts, it's worse, right? Like,
Yes,
So
You don't-
you're protected if we adopt this.
correct. No one wants to pay full price on anything.
Would this affect everybody's insurance in the town? I mean, if we didn't comply? I mean, even those of us who are not in a floodplain, could it be a general to the town?
No, this would just be people who are required to have flood insurance because there's a flood plain on their property.
Will they be notified in advance that their property is gonna be part of an article coming up?
No, this is a town-wide zoning change. The notification you get is the newspaper article. And these maps, the one who is changing the maps is not us, it's FEMA. And the maps haven't actually changed significantly since their last iteration, like 10 years ago.
So this protects people who are in a floodplain.
Yes,
And the only people that might find problem with this would be a developer or somebody who wanted to build something, right? But we as a town have no control over this designation. So it's just, yep, FEMA and the state have designated these areas. And we changed the zoning in such a way to protect the people in that area so that they can get the proper insurance.
yes. So if we were to do nothing, our current bylaw also requires a special permit for anything in the floodplain. So you would still need to go through all the hooks associated with building in the floodplain and get 0 of the discounts. So even developers would be incentivized if they lived in town to vote for it.
Thank you.
And a hint.
Move on. Move along.
Alright, and so this is, you said it was a restatement
Yes,
and that the actual flood zone hasn't changed significantly.
it has
But
not.
the actual parts of and it's restated to conform with the state requirement.
Yes, going through a red line was going to be a terrible process for everyone. So I'm just scraping and starting anew,
Yeah,
but making sure that that everything I'm writing is still consistent with the most locally unique parts of our bylaw. So
okay,
it is, like I said, mostly the state model bylaw, but I have incorporated as much as the original as I was allowed to.
Okay.
And the maps, like as I said, this is not a zoning map change. All we have to do is we used to have to reference every, the town was divided in grids, and like this was like panel like A1, A2, except they had longer names. So we had in our current bylaw to number all of the panels that apply to the town of Medfield, so people can look them up. Now you basically go on their website, type in your address, and you see if you're impacted or not. And all we have to do is reference these maps. So in case of a zoning change, you would have to be notified because the town is changing the maps. And this is not the case. I don't know what kind of outreach FEMA is doing. They might be notifying people in the floodplain. I am not sure, but that is not a local responsibility.
any questions on this, Jill or Pete, any questions on this floodplain district article? If not, maybe we can move on to the next one.
No questions.
This one might be a little more interesting.
For better or for worse. I don't know if it's good. Let me pull out. And if the Warrant Committee would like to see the presentation that I'll be giving the planning board, which goes section by section, a little more detail, but still keeping it fairly user-friendly, I'm happy to share that over email with you if you're interested.
Do they record those or their meetings?
Yes, I can share it with you. I have the PowerPoint already made. I can circulate it. Or if you're interested in joining the hearing on 3/24.
No, I got enough meetings.
I get it.
Unless there are other people.
Sacrifice 2 weeks.
This is the guy who sits on the SBC, so he's got twice as many meetings as all of us. All right.
Thank you. So this is the second required bylaw change. If
Required to comply with state.
so the state law changed already. It was effective as of February 2nd of 2025. So what we're doing here is we're trying to fill in the gaps that the legislation left for us to make a local process that makes sense and is still compliant. But if we do nothing, then we're worse off because the law already applies. So this is for accessory dwelling units, which is, it used to be called granny flats or in-law apartments back when it was restricted to only a family member. Now it's just basically a tiny house in the same lot as your house. So these are some examples of ADUs to give you a little visual. Detached units are very common in a lot of older parts of town. People have garages already existing. They're going to have carriage houses depending on how rural the area is. So you could convert your carriage house or a garage into an ADU if you so wish. Some ADUs are going to be attached. These just look like massive houses. Honestly, like not much distinguishable from like a Mac mansion, really. They usually blend very well. You can't always tell there's a second unit in it. You could always add another floor if you had a single story home. We only have a limit on 2.5 stories in Medfield. You could convert your basement into an ADU, subject to some safety requirements in case of fire. If you're able to get in and out through means of egress, then go for it. You can build a unit above your garage, which is a very common thing we see. And like I said, garage conversion is another type of garage or carriage house conversion. It's another type. It's fairly common because it's a little cheaper. So as I said, this is a required update to comply with the new state law. This is section 8 of chapter 150 of the Acts of 2024, and then newly issued 76 CMR 71. Basically, what that law says is that ADUs must be allowed by right in single-family residential zones, meaning anywhere that you allow for a single home family to be built, which is basically everywhere except the industrial district. So you'll be able to build an ADU without any sort of special permit or without any sort of variances. So no discretionary approval is allowed. The maximum size of an ADU cannot exceed 900 square feet or 50% of the principal dwelling's gross floor area, whichever one of the two is smaller. The towns may enforce reasonable setbacks, height restrictions, and site plan reviews. I was on the phone with the Attorney General a few weeks ago, and her office, not that important. So what reasonable setbacks means here is if you have an accessory structure, specific setbacks for like a very small shed, so something under 200 square feet, that's the most lenient type of setback you're going to have in a zoning district. That's 12 feet to the side and like 20 feet to the back. That is now your ADU setbacks because it's the most lenient type of setback you have. If there's no other setback specified, then we're defaulting to the principal dwelling and how tall it can be, how much of the lot can be covered by an impervious surface. So we're defaulting to that, but side setbacks and rear setbacks are going to be a lot less strict. And again, we have no say over it. It's very clear about that. Good. We also can no longer enforce owner occupancy. So I may live in the bigger house and I can rent out the smaller one, or I may choose to live to the, move to the smaller one, rent out the big one. My mom can move in. There's no way we can enforce family relations anymore. Like it's not restricted to a family member. You're able to rent it out. And if I wanted to, I can now move to the Cape and rent out my big house and my tiny home here in Medfield. That is also allowed. There are some options to prohibit short-term rentals, which we intend to exercise. So we're trying to define short-term rentals locally as something that like an Airbnb. If you're renting out for less than 31 days, that's not allowed in Medfield. You're not allowed to have like a quick turnover. You may, however, have long-term rental. Like it can be like any other rental unit, just not a vacation property that sees it's monetized in that way. We don't have an Airbnb provision in Medfield. It's not a huge problem. It's not something that comes up often, but because the state law is giving us the option to prohibit short-term rentals, we're taking it until we can write a bylaw if the planning board so wishes.
So just before you move on, just so I understand this, so the current bylaw in Medfield doesn't deal with short-term rentals?
No.
Okay, it's just silent.
Well, the current bylaw is restricted to family members.
Family members, okay.
Like most places that are allowed in-law apartments, had to be related by blood. Every year you're supposed to notify my office, like, yes, my mom or my aunt, my brother is still living there.
But if somebody wanted to do an Airbnb currently, they couldn't do it.
No, it's not an allowed use under a table of use regulation.
Okay.
I would tell them no, if they ask.
But this state law gives you the ability to restrict just short-term rentals, not long-term rentals.
This allows you to, some communities are particularly afraid that this was going to be rapidly monetized.
Yeah.
So as a show that they're listening to local concerns, they decided to allow, there's very few things you can regulate here, but if you wish to prohibit this units from being Airbnbs, you may prohibit it. long-term rentals or what happens inside a dwelling is not, you cannot legally regulate that by zoning. That's exempt from zoning regulation under 40A. So we couldn't say, like the terms of, we can only regulate the one station, and that's a fairly new state law. If we were to want Airbnbs, there's a way of taxing them like they were hotels. Like the town would have to pass that at town meeting and choose to like tax them further if they wished. But again, Medfield's not necessarily a tourist destination. It's a very residential community.
Yeah.
So I haven't seen many of those, but it's.
So a couple questions.
Mhm,
In 900 square feet is not that big.
mhm.
Is it a requirement that in the 900 square feet, there has to be a kitchen and bathroom?
Yes.
Or can you go into the main house to go to the bathroom or use the kitchen?
No, so
Back in the fields.
so the definition, the new law is actually defines ADUs as being a self-contained living unit. It has to have a kitchen, it has to have a bathroom. If you were to not have a principal dwelling, it's basically a standalone home or apartment. If it doesn't have that, if you can have a bathroom and a bedroom and it's just attached, like that's just an addition. But the fact that it's an independent living facility is what makes it an ADU.
And then you mentioned no short-term rentals.
Mhm.
There are such things as month-to-month leases.
And
where
that's
you
okay.
enter into- Okay, but then you could well have someone sign a month-to-month lease. And the
It'd be
private
there for
agreement
a
is
year.
that you'll be
Break it
gone
up
for
in
30
3
days and I'll give it to somebody else after 30 days. That I assume is just I don't think this is gonna be a big problem in town. But that's something you won't be able to catch, right?
Yes, and we wouldn't even be able to like rents must be longer than 6 months. Like we're not allowed to state that in the zoning bylaws. That's just outside of our purview.
Right.
So this is there to sort of dissuade people with ADUs, turning them into sort of short-term rentals. Like if my neighbor put an ADU in, had like somebody coming in every week, a different person renting it out.
There's like the pictures are playing and, like you want to say in Medfield, I have a pool. So you rent out the pool and you're, like tiny. So it's to prohibit, anything like 31 days or less is how we're choosing to define it. I think the state has like a 90 days. It's a short-term rental.
But on the flip side of that, the purpose, is the purpose of the state law to allow for more housing?
Permanent housing.
That's what the,
Yes,
I mean,
that's-
so we're looking at
That's
from
the
a-
impetus for what they
how do we
call law.
protect it, but the state is saying we need to have more dwelling units.
Right.
You can't prohibit someone from creating this dwelling unit, providing that you do it in compliance with the zoning.
Right.
So because
So
of that,
that's an important piece, I think, from my mind, as I'm working through my mind, because it's intended to allow
Increase the
these.
housing supply.
yes,
Increase
that's
the
the way. of
Increase
keeping housing
housing supply
affordable
and
is more supply.
presumably, somebody could have a long-term rent.
Mhm.
I have a question on the short-term rental restrictions. This says may. Does the intent on the warrant is that we will have will, or will we just sort of say we may in the future?
The actual article language says that they shall not be. This slide is strictly what the state law says, not what our current bylaw.
Okay.
So what does that mean? So that means we already have
No, the proposed bylaw will use the word shall.
that's my question. Does it use shall or will?
The ADUs shall not be allowed for short-term rentals.
Yeah,
What does it mean?
what's on the slide is not what's gonna be in the bylaw. It'll use the word shall not.
So we're doing two things then.
No, what you're seeing here is a summary of the state law.
Yeah, I
not
know
a
that, but
summary.
what I'm saying is the warrant then does two things. It brings us into compliance with the state law, and then it goes beyond that by taking a stance on short-term rentals.
Correct.
That's right.
Well, that's not what we said at the beginning to tee this up.
What do you mean?
Well, what you're saying is that the guidance from the state is that we may choose to pass guidance on a short-term rental, but that doesn't, so but the warrant is going or whatever, article is going beyond that and saying we are, in addition to going into compliance with the state on this ADU issue, we're going beyond that and taking a stance on short-term rentals as well.
Correct.
Correct.
That's
And
correct.
why are we doing that?
I think probably what the planning board has made a decision that that's
Yes.
the best interest of the town.
Yeah, the planning board was interested in eventually perhaps writing an actual bylaw that says that short-term rentals are not allowed. We haven't gone around writing such a bylaw. It has not, well, between MBTA and other things, it hasn't been high on our radar. So what we're doing is here is just saying, is this allowed in an ADU, yes or no? And we're choosing to go, no, short-term rentals are not allowed in ADUs, and that's it. We're not making a broader statement, if you may use your principal dwelling unit, or, you know, this is just as it relates to ADUs.
What's your concern, Pete?
Well, because this has to have a high majority of to pass, right? It's a zoning change, right?
Yeah,
So why
I
are
don't
they
know if
tying?
it's 50%.
I think it's a simple majority for this.
Simple majority.
Majority.
Yeah, simple majority. So what's your concern?
It just seems odd that they're tying two issues together. One is, hey, let's just like do whatever the state says, or they're going to withhold our funding. Okay, got it, approved. But this one is now like going beyond what the state has mandated, and so that's actually makes it more complicated.
Can I just ask a clarifying question? So the short-term rental piece of it is just related to ADUs, not short-term rentals in the rest of town?
Yes.
It's just for the ADU.
Just the ADUs,
Yeah.
not short-term rentals anywhere else?
No.
Yeah.
Right, but still, it's not as simple as like, hey, let's just like do whatever the state says, or they're going to get annoyed, and we'll have to deal with the loss of funding. We're now adding to that, and I just
I don't think there's any,
Funding.
there's no funding tied to this particular article. If it's already state law.
Yes.
So somebody could come in and put an ADU on their property
All right. So
without this article.
so then why does it say this is required to update to comply with the new state law on the top of the page?
Because we currently have a bylaw that will be deemed unusable by the Attorney General, and it's gonna stay in our books, and we need something that when someone comes to me and says, I want an ADU that's gonna be 1,200 feet and it's gonna be within the setbacks, I need to have a permitting process to allow it. Either be by, and I can get into the bylaw later, but I need to know what is a reasonable decision. How does the town of Medfield wish to regulate it? It needs to be spelled out for transparency. So that's what we're doing here. If we were to take no action, I think the default would be that the town of Medfield makes no mentions of short-term rentals in their bylaw as of now. If it makes no mentions, it's interpreted as they are not allowed.
That's my
So they're
okay.
currently not allowed
Okay.
in general.
So this really isn't a change.
No, it's not a change. We're just clearly stating it so there's no confusion, but it's not a change.
Okay. Well, that's an important point. I didn't realize that. Yeah.
And why does it say may in the update? Then you know what I mean? Then that would have been a change.
That's just an option that the state is giving
The
us.
state is allowing towns
I see.
to do this. In other words, they passed a general law and they said, oh, there's this one area in short-term rentals that a town can have discretion over what they want to do.
Okay.
So in a current draft bylaw, it says under D, owner occupancy and rental conditions. In accordance with applicable statutes, owner occupancy of either the principal dwelling or the accessory dwelling unit is not
Right.
required.
Right.
However, short-term rentals are prohibited. For the purpose of this bylaw, a short-term rental is defined as the use, possession, or right to use or possess an ADU for a period of 31 consecutive calendar days or fewer, regardless of whether such use is as a lessee, tenant, guest, or licensee.
Right. That's my point, though. This slide says this is required to comply with the new state law. And what you just read is not required to comply with the new state law.
No, it's not, but
That's all I'm pointing out, right? The
Yeah,
whole
yeah.
discussion.
yeah, no, it's the state law exists today. Okay. So,
If we
They-
do nothing, then, as I understand it, and I'll let Maria correct me, then the town of Medfield will have no regulation limiting the superseding state law. And therefore, short-term rentals will be permitted. Someone builds an ADU and they start letting it out for 2 weeks at a time. I don't think that's particularly likely to happen, but there's nothing that says they can't do that unless we enact a bylaw saying, no, you can't.
I'm not sure about that, because I think I heard her say that without this new updated bylaw, we're silent on short-term rentals, which means they can't do it.
Silent means no under zoning. If it's not in the table of use, then it just means you can't.
Isn't that then in conflict with the state law? State law says you can build an ADU and do with it what you want, don't they?
Unless it's a short-term rental, you may say no to those.
We may, and that's what this bylaw does.
Yes, and we're saying no in this bylaw.
But we don't have anything on the books now that says no. So if we didn't have this new bylaw, someone could do short-term rental.
It's a gray area, 'cause we're not saying anything, the state's saying you may or may not, so I don't want the resident coming and making an argument. The state law says this and you say nothing, is that a yes?
We don't pass this, right?
Right.
It just stays the way it is.
Yes,
What happens?
I would say they're not allowed,
They're in the short-term rentals.
you're not allowed, yeah, if we did
What
nothing.
authority?
So all we're doing is ratifying what the state is saying.
Yeah.
All we're doing.
Better clarifying.
Yes,
Yeah, we're being,
and the next slide has what my current draft contains,
Okay.
as it relates to this.
All right, let's go.
Yes. So, so the summary of the bylaw,
This is a much shorter bylaw.
yes, it is. This bylaw will allow for a single ADU by right in any single-family residential zoning district, provided that they are within conforming setbacks, meaning whatever the front setback is on the district for the main dwelling, the side setback of accessory structures, and the rear setback of accessory structures. Again, whatever bylaw exists that's more permissive, and that's, again, the default here by the state. And it's by right use if your ADU is less than 900 square feet. So if you meet those setbacks and you're a small unit, you have to just go through a building permit and that's it. I am proposing that we permit the conversion of a pre-existing non-conforming structure into an ADU through a site plan approval by the planning board. And this is something that the state is allowing us to do. Site plan approval is a yes with conditions. It's not a discretionary permitting process. And this is just to ensure that there's some sort of local review. If you were to have a carriage house that's super, super close to your neighbor, and you may want some board saying like, maybe plant some trees there for privacy, or just some sort of board negotiating with the applicant in cases that are a little more, I don't want to say controversial, but again, we cannot really say no to a protected use ADU. The most we can do is a site plan approval that will be very limited, but it might still give us a little bit more teeth than a by right building permit. That is for using existing structures that may not be conforming to zoning. And we're also allowing the construction of a new non-conforming ADU. So like this is called now a local option ADU. Through a special permit, that's the last, provide for a discretionary special permit approval process through the zoning board to allow for ADUs exceeding 900 square feet. So a non-protected use ADU. So if I wanted to say 900 is too small, I need 1,200 feet. Then the Attorney General's office.
Oh, so I was gonna say,
This is of not more than 900 square.
are you on the last bullet?
I'm on the last
She's
bullet.
on the
sorry.
last bullet.
Oh, okay.
But the, I'm sorry, because the earlier you said the law said it has to be less than 900 square feet.
That's a protected. You lose protection when you go over 900.
Okay.
So now you're not under the
So
state's
you can
bubble.
do over 900,
protection.
but you have to get special approval. through the
That's what
zoning
I'm
board.
proposing. If we default to the state and someone says, I want to do a 1,200 square feet ADU, and we just have the state bylaws, like, no, your cap is 900. That's all you get to work with. But we have a lot of cases where people want bigger ADUs, or if they have a carriage house that's already larger, it's feels odd to tell them like shave off some space. You need to get down to 900. I don't care if it's already built. So I'm trying to provide a permitting process to give people the opportunity to have larger ADUs. They're not protected by the state. So the Attorney General's office said we may regulate them as we want. This is able to be a special permit. If it's too large for the neighborhood, if it's too close, if it causes any issues, we can say no. And you can go back to your bubble of protection if you make it 900 square feet.
So who decides that? The zoning board?
Yes.
And you, I mean, it seems logical that there would be situations where somebody has like a barn or some type of
Yeah.
big structure.
An existing structure.
Yeah, an
I think
existing-
This is primarily what you're.
If it's existing, I could see that, but if someone wants to come in and put a new, you know,
But you can say no to that.
If it's larger than 900, you can say no.
If it's new,
if
in
they,
either case, you're setting, or the planning board wants to protect those dwellings like the carriage house that are already there. And it falls under this ADU protection
Yes,
by this exception.
yes.
But it doesn't open up the whole Pandora's box that anybody who wants to do over 900 square feet,
Right.
it's okay, because you will hold that. Excuse me.
this I think is Gus's concern, that the big Blackstones or big property developers will come in, buy up, you know, parcels and put in, they'll build these ADUs, like multiple ADUs exceeding 900 square feet, you know.
And that's something that, again, the state's giving us a right to regulate it. We may say locally that a protected use ADU is a 1,200 square foot ADU. We can say that, we can raise the bubble of protection. But I'm proposing is that I feel like by now I know the kind of questions like will come up in a hearing. I think if it's larger than 900, we may want to look at lot coverage. We may want to look at stormwater. We might want to look at
Yeah,
other
it
things.
seems, yeah, but right now you're silent on what those criteria are.
Our current bylaw, which again will be rendered usable, like it's already useless,
Yeah.
really. Did not have a cap on the number of like how big an ADU could be. It did not.
Yeah,
I think they tended to be basement units.
but have they thought of maybe, like the way this is worded, it just says you have to go to zoning board of appeal if it's over 900.
Yes,
Right.
yes.
And then it's totally up to them and their judgment. Have they thought through, like, they want to be more specific about what the circumstances would be, like, you know, existing structures, using the word existing structures or something like that? I'm just throwing that out.
That's something that's why we're having the joint meeting next week.
Okay.
I need to have both boards together because one of them is spreading, one of them might be in the enforcement authority.
Okay,
And so, as I've had some preliminary conversations so far, and again, I just got more information today at 4 p.m. So the state is releasing this very close to our town meeting. So it's a rapidly changing situation.
okay.
So I know what we can or can't allow by right, and I want to get into cases where we may want to regulate it further. So if it's an existing, if it's a carriage house right now, like it's built where it's built, the setbacks are what the setbacks are.
Okay.
But if it's under 900 square feet, let's make it a site plan approval. You know, let's just like make sure that everything is in order. If your carriage house is giant and it is where it is, maybe because it's over 900 square feet, you may want to do a special permit. Even though it's already built, it is so big, it lost protection by being that big. So
Where do
you
we
either
come
shave
up
off
with
that
900?
space or no.
Where do we come up with the number 900?
That's in the regulations. That's 760
Yeah,
CMR.
that's in this
That's the
law.
state.
That's the state
That's a
law.
state statute.
Okay.
But I thought you said
Well,
that the
it
state,
sounds like there's more, this is still being baked, I guess, a little.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes, I just got the model bylaw. It got issued again today.
no.
okay.
So
So we might have to talk to you again when you get through all of when you think you have a final product, I guess. Right?
yes, I think I'll know much better after the zoning board and planning board meet, and they're the ones who will ultimately set this criteria. I've had a lot of conversations with them and things that they wanted to regulate, we're not allowed to regulate. I've had 2 phone calls with the Attorney General's office already, and we are not even able to require, the Attorney General's office told me no off-street parking space. I cannot require an off-street parking space, and then the model bylaw says I may.
Yeah,
Yeah.
good question, because that's in your checklist here. So if you're outside of half mile from a transit station, you can't put parking restrictions.
And that's what I wrote, and the Attorney General told me take it off, like take it
I
out.
think that aspect is going to be somewhat controversial.
I would like to require one off street, because what happens if it's a snow day? Like, if you need cars off the street, like, it's a safety thing at a certain point. You need to be able to have cars in a driveway, not on the
Yeah,
street.
yeah.
So I think now that I have the model bylaw to fall back on, I want to make sure that we have at least one off-street parking space. That's as much as we are able to require. I agree.
I feel like this one could generate a lot of discussion at town
Yeah,
meeting.
totally.
Yes,
What do you think?
there's a lot to it.
Yeah.
We've just asked a lot of questions.
Right.
Um, So I think we're
So
gonna
you're
have,
gonna want the recording from March 24th.
yeah, we're gonna have to probably regroup, I guess,
Definitely,
once you kind of get to what you think your final product is. Okay.
yes.
All right.
I'm sorry, can you just also, when you come back, outline a little bit more clearly what happens if the town doesn't approve this?
Yeah, I can make a slide for that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
what a no vote means.
yeah, and just to recap, but I will make a slide. I think that's a great idea. If we don't do anything, then you may have an ADU by right no bigger than 900 square feet or 50% of the main house's square footage. At the setbacks that I mentioned, which is the least restrictive ones in the neighborhood. I think that's it. Like, they would be allowed.
All right, so,
And 900 would be your cap. There will be no option, like if it's a conversion, I would have to tell them 900 square feet or nothing. I don't know what to do if there's a conversion and the setbacks are off. I don't know if I can regulate that. I don't know how to regulate that.
But, you know, as I'm listening, and I think it might, you know, in my mind, I'm thinking that, so where we are today, where the state law comes in,
Mhm.
and what you're trying to do to link the two.
Yes.
And I think that, because, you know, I having a much kind of empathy for your position and the kinds of things that you're trying to address, because it sounds to me like it's from experience that these things come up, so you can't cover everything, I get it. But philosophically, I think maybe trying to, where we are today, what the law does, what conflicts does that create? Or what gaps does that create? And what are you trying to do? Because I think it will be a lot of discussion, but it sounds to me, I'll give you credit, you're trying to protect the town,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, that's the missing.
And I really want that message to come through, the protections you're providing.
So I think that's been one of our concerns over the last couple of years with the state. This was in terms of MBTA communities, it's in terms of the ADU, and this has nothing about housing. I'm speaking of this, is it either of these both related to housing? The state is enforcing these regulations on the town. And for me, usurping our local zoning control. And what they're doing is they're making our planners, our land use directors, the messenger to the towns. When in most cases, particularly with MBTA, we had very little choice in that, or we lost the funding as Peter mentioned on Zoom. So my concern is that we are the state is asking us to put our staff on the front lines to present these things when it's actually the state that is pushing these. And they're nowhere to be seen in terms of, the regulations and guidance are just coming out. So they're being not as helpful, I guess I should say, as I would like to see them in terms of presenting these to the.
Right, and what I'm saying is that given the way you've made this presentation and what I'm getting from it is we don't want these articles to be a referendum on state law. We want it to be what you're doing the best we can
That's
to
what Medfield will.
address,
Yeah.
to address what you just said. The state's dumped it in our lap, but there's nothing we can do about
No.
that. That's not an issue for town meeting. So as much as you can diffuse that, I think. Makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, the.
So it's
uh,
not-
It's
the
not,
di-
it's
the
not like the
difficult-
planning board and Maria said last year, hey, let's tackle ADUs at town meeting.
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
we came up with this great idea, so.
But I think the difficulty that you're gonna have with this, I think Peter sort of hit on it, and that is. What happens if we don't pass this? Like, what's the worst, is it the end of the world? There's no funding tied to this. What are the implications? It maybe is gonna make your life a lot more difficult, but, what are the practical implications, right? And then, why is this, like Bob said, why is this a good idea to do?
Yeah. I think I
You
can,
can answer those two questions, I think.
And, and
I think it'd be
taking
better.
some of the relief off of you isn't a bad thing. That's okay, it's okay that you don't have to be the judge on every single item. And that's not good for the town, but it certainly isn't good for you to have,
You're basically trying to accommodate
Right.
existing conditions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Abide by the law and accommodate the existing conditions.
Yeah.
And that's the second half.
Yeah,
The
I
rest
mean,
of the story, as Paul Harvey would say.
Who?
Remember that?
Now you're showing your age.
Gonna have a lot of explaining to people tomorrow morning about this.
I think
This is the hard part.
Oh, Hardy. I know who it is.
All right, is there anything else that you wanna cover?
I think as far as this goes, and I just wanna make sure I have the correct feedback, so when I present the planning board, I wanna make sure I'm incorporating everything you've said. So what we should be trying to convey at town meeting as well is where we are today. What does this law do? What conflict does it create as we currently stand? And what is Medfield trying to do about it to retain some sort of local control by this state imposed law? And there should also be a slide about what happens if we do nothing.
Right.
Like what does
It's an
Medfield look
overview.
like? Yes, yes.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, I think that's a pretty good summary.
okay.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you think I should clarify that would make it easier to explain to people?
Anybody else?
It'll probably come up the next time we come and.
And that's fine. Again, the law passed late last year and it was effective February 2nd. The regulations came out like in December,
It already,
amended in January,
Yeah.
and the model bylaw came out today.
yeah,
so-
that's
It's fascinating.
the typical state of answer to things, I guess.
Yes.
All
So,
right.
okay. I
Well, thank
appreciate
you very much for all your work on this.
Appreciate all
Appreciate
your
it.
questions.
Great
It's
work.
always helpful to hear your feedback.
And thank you for everything you do.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Yeah.
gives me a lot of confidence. You do a great job.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
All right.
And I wouldn't let your job. You have the right attitude.
Can you share?
Thank you.
Thanks, Rick.
Well, then you send this out and do it.
The ones that you printed out.
Yeah.
So the next agenda item is something I added and I did some work on, and learned about sort of the results of a Arrow Street study that it's not final yet, but it's been through a couple drafts, and I think it's pretty close to being final, but it hasn't been approved yet. But it basically looked at it was an update to a 20-year capital plan for the town, and it was last done in 2017, I think.
I think it started in 2016, finished in 2017.
2017, they finished the last one. And so, it needed to be done. My initial, reaction when I started reading the report is like, I don't think we have been really briefed on too much of what's in there. And that's just because it has not final yet, but I thought it would be good to talk about some of the things I saw in there. and just, you know, that, I mean, this slide, I've shown this before. This is the art of managing a consistent, you know, sustainable capital investment with the balancing that with the tax impact, right?
Right.
So, and most of our big capital projects, when it comes to buildings, are very expensive and they have to be financed with exempt debt. And as we all know, exempt debt is a temporary property tax increase. So we do the you know, the tax levy for under the Prop 2.5 formula, and that comes up with a levy amount. And then whatever you've voted and approved on for exempt debt gets added to that levy. And this decreases every year, right? If you don't add new debt, it just decreases. So that the taxpayer impact goes down every year. And it goes over the life of the debt. And so, you know, you could see here, there's the existing debt service is projected to be 2.4% of our general fund revenue by 2030 if we don't do any more borrowing. And the 10% policy that we have in our financial policies that'd be like a $6 million gap. Yeah, so you have capacity. So the problem is that if you don't pay attention to this, you get all these capital projects coming due at the same time, and your taxes just go through the roof. It's almost like you need to do something like every year or two, a little piece or manage it so that the impact to taxpayers is not extreme in that everybody's sharing in that burden, you know, proportionately. So
Interesting, because one of the schedules that was in that other big thing, Dale Street, the rough estimate is 4.2 million of debt. That'd be 4.2 of the 6.2.
yes, that's right. Yes, yeah. So
And that's not, if I read the schedule correctly, you have a whole host of projects.
yeah, so go to the next slide. So this is so what I did is I did a couple things. I tried to went through, actually, why don't you go to the next slide? Sorry. Yeah, so this is the 20-year capital plan. In the Arrow Street report, they prioritize the needs of the building into priority 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Priority 1s, the definition is at the bottom here. It says conditions require immediate action to correct a safety hazard, stop accelerated deterioration, return a facility to operation, or correct an environmental hazard. So we have, just for the schools, there's before Dale Street. So I separated out Dale Street. There's 34.6 million of priority 1 and needs that, according to this definition, should be dealt with in the 2-year period. And then in priority 2 is a little longer term. It's a 3 to 5 year period. And this conditions will soon become critical if not addressed. Conditions include intermittent operations, rapid, deterioration, or potential life safety hazards or environmental noncompliance.
In the priority for the schools, are that primarily roofs?
So basically, it's a combination of I would say 3 things. About 19 million is roofs, and then the rest is sort of a combination of windows is a big thing, replacement of windows and HVAC. But the roof one appeared to, when I read the report, I mean, we have leaks in pretty much all of our schools. There's there's leaks coming into the schools from the roof. So
We were a desert climate.
yeah, Yeah. And so, and that's right in the report. You can read that. But, and then, the priority 3 stuff is 6 to 9 years out, and then 4 is 10 to 19 years. And then they have a priority 5, which is basically, stuff that's grandfathered. You're not required to fix it, or you don't have to fix it. But you can see, I mean, these are big numbers, $100 million over 20 years. But in the next 2 to 5 years, in the next 2 years, there's 37 million if you take out the FAP Center and the Dale Street School. It's 37 million in 2 years, and then 42 over the next 3 to 5 years. And for the schools, it's mostly, I'd say 19 of it is the in the priority 1, about 19 of it is roofs. I'm generalizing, but it's all in the report. And then I think most of the rest of it in priority 2 is like windows and HVAC stuff. That's a big ticket item too, HVAC stuff. So, I just saw this and I was like, well, I was trying to think how would we deal with something like this, and are people even aware that this need is out there, and what are we doing about it, kind of thing. Because like I go back to that first slide, it's like time goes on, the problem doesn't get easier, it gets worse. Actually, that roof number in 2017 was $8 million. And now it's 19 million.
Yeah, no, it's 20.
So, if you could go back to the second slide. So what I tried to do is, because I always like to put things in perspective of what's it mean to an average resident taxpayer. So, assuming we don't have an operating override, up 2.5 override, our operating budget typically will go up about $400 a year. This is for the average assessed value of $980,000, using the current tax rate. And then the Dale Street School, assuming it's a 475 to 500 enrollment, that we know we're in the MSBA program, and it's a 30-year term, level debt amortization. It's about $1,053. And I have all the details on this are in that spreadsheet I sent that has all different tabs. But then I took each of these roof needs, and they were didn't print it out with the actual, but I ran it through the debt calculator, assuming we borrowed it on a 20-year term, and I assumed level principal amortization, which is what we normally do, except for 50-year building schools. And these are the tax impacts at a 4% interest rate was what I used. So to put a new roof on Blake is $79 a year for the average taxpayer. To put a new roof on Wheelock is $49. Memorial, it's almost $60 a year. And the high school is the most expensive one at $98. And so I also ran some assumptions about what a park and rec 20,000 square foot facility. If you borrowed that money, if you use like a $1,200 per square foot cost, 20,000 square feet, it's like a $24 million project cost. And you would have, if you borrowed that over 20 years with level principal, you'd have a $522 hit. So just, I'm not saying we should do that. I'm just trying to quantify, because we sat through that presentation from the developer who said, there was going to be a 20,000 square foot, facility up there. I mean, if they ended up negotiating something and that was, that was picked up by the developer, that saved $500 to the average taxpayer.
Sure.
So, but, there's all sorts of issues with whether that will happen or not, but, so that's like $2,000, $2,200. And then I took the tax mitigation fund and land proceeds, our goal of 4.5 million. And I said, you get 1.5 million a year savings. You spread it out over 3 years, so it's 1.5 million. And that gets you an offset of like $364 on the $1,000 Dale Street bump. Let's just go to the last slide. These are the this is a summary of the project costs for roofs. So this slide is just on roofs, and this is the $19 million number. And I assume if we every couple years we went back to the MSBA with a new school in their roof replacement for the accelerated program, you assume you got a 30% reimbursement on that. So you'd borrow the net, and this is just doing the debt service and then the cost. But the point here was that, if you did them all, if for some reason you said, I need to fix all the, there's an emergency, we have to fix all the roofs next year, there wouldn't be enough money in the municipal building stabilization fund. You only get $1 million each year.
Right.
And you're talking about $1.2 million of debt service. So, and you wouldn't be able to do anything else in the municipal. It would exhaust the full budget, right? So, this was sort of a little bit shocking to me.
Scary.
Yeah.
It's absolutely scary.
It's terrifying, and
Well,
I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but at what point is the percentage to the town that we're gonna have to do an override? Because that's the only way, right?
well, there's a couple of things. First of all, this analysis is terrific. With a finance background, I can understand it and I can follow it. I think to your point, your question is, this to me is kind of one of the essence of what the Warrant Committee needs to do. We need to identify this and bring it forward. The question is, how do you communicate it in such a way that it's not shocking, because the numbers in the front, the absolute numbers in the front are shocking, but the absolute numbers in the back, more manageable in terms of problem statement, you know what I'm saying? And the thing is that I think it's our responsibility, I think, in the Warrant Committee to bring this forward, but we need to do it in such a way that it's not just dropping a bomb,
Yeah.
But I think that, and of course, a fundamental piece of this is what you show on the front,
Right.
which is,
Go to the first slide.
what we're doing right now is taking, the reality is though, the advantage that we're getting from this, we're absorbing into the operating fund, right? Because this gap is our fixed cost,
Well,
as we
it's
say,
not
right?
technically being absorbed into the operating fund. It's lowering our tax rate.
That's what I mean.
It's not,
Yeah.
because the operating budget that's kind of self-contained within the 2.5 framework, right? This is, the exempt debt is outside that.
Right, but the 25, the 75-25 at the end of the day is advantaged by this reduction.
I don't think so. No,
No?
the way they do,
Understand it the way
the way we decide what the tax levy will be is we go through what prior year's tax levy was, and we add 2.5%. And then we add two numbers to that. And when we add new growth, right?
Right.
Then we add two numbers to it. We add the municipal building stabilization override and exempt debt. That's the total levy that gets taxed to all residents in town, right? But when we do the operating budget, we don't consider those last two things as revenue. We don't consider the exempt debt as revenue, and we don't consider municipal building as revenue. So the revenue that gets split 75-25 does not include these. And so what's happening is we're getting a tax break every year as this debt gets paid down.
Right. And but
There's no
we show
plan
that
to, there's no
we're
plan
pushing
to,
it off to the future.
yeah.
Right,
Because
no, I mean,
it's coming in. We're
Yeah.
creating a gap that's
the
gonna have
short
to be
term
filled.
outlook is fine, better than we have. But there's all this work that needs to be done that's not presently being addressed.
Right, pay me now or pay me later.
It's
Right.
it's a lot of deferred, big ticket items.
Yeah, the problem's not
That-
going away, but.
That
the
were
revenue-
there in 2017, the roofs were there in 2017.
So the problem stays, but the financing of it goes away until the roof off comes in.
Yeah, no, that's precisely the way to put it.
Yeah, but the thing is that even our conversation right now shows the difficulty of how do you communicate that?
It's hard to understand, I know,
But I think it needs to be.
But this says though, this schedule here that came from that Arrow Street, it said, but priority one, within the next 2 years, before 27, it's 54.6, almost $54.7 million.
that includes Dale Street and the
It
FAFSA. Yeah,
It
that includes Dale and the FAF. I didn't include that.
doesn't include Dale.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it includes Dale and the FAF. I didn't
Yes.
include that in my analysis.
Yeah.
In the schedule that I'm showing here.
Right.
Yeah,
Well,
Yeah, but I guess,
I think.
so it's worse.
even worse.
Yes, it's worse.
But the way but the way, presenting it now, we need to think of, I think as the Warrant Committee needs to think about it and work on it. But there are some short-term issues there. One is the Park and Rec opportunity. And, dollarizing that in terms of, again, $522, for 20 years. All right, that's an opportunity cost,
Right.
for which there is an alternative that needs to be
Well-
understood.
Well, it's a,
Potential alternative.
that,
Probably
there's
no-
a lot of disagreement on.
Well, of course, but I mean, it's in and of itself,
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's the absolute answer,
Yeah.
but
I mean, an alternative is take the 12 acres, sell it to whatever developer will give us the highest price in the world for it. We have to give half of that to the state, but then that's a sum of money that the town now has and can apply to, current expenses for tons and tons of deferred maintenance.
I'm gonna have you take that up with the woman who does the painting. No, but I
I
mean,
mean, the thing is that we do have, one way to look at it is this 10% number, right? The policy of having debt not exceed the 10% and not leaving a big gap, right? That means you're not
Right.
reinvesting in town needs. We do have, if you did all these school buildings and the Dale Street, forget about FAF, but if you did Dale Street and the roofs,
Right.
you would come very close to the 10%.
And I was thinking, well, as I looked at this,
I mean,
there's no way we're gonna do Dale Street and have that $4 million principal payment until, what, 3-4 years from now?
right,
So you could do the roof,
do at least
all
one,
the roof, you could do them all,
yeah,
before that happens.
right,
to help.
No, I
close
think
the gap.
that's exactly right.
Isn't this covered in the capital budget, like recommendations?
So the
Oh,
20-year plan hasn't been presented to the capital budget committee yet, It's still being reviewed by the permanent planning and building committee and the select board. So this is an
Right, but
update
like-
to the existing 20-year plan we have.
I mean, but
We only have $1 million a year in the municipal building stabilization.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, so one thing we were thinking about is like, that, you know, when that article of municipal building stabilization got passed in 18,
Mhm.
it was an arbitrary number, million, because it was equal to what the feasibility study was, and that was the first item that was gonna get paid.
Right.
And so it was known back then, it was not sufficient.
right,
Nobody said that that $1 million would be enough to fund the 2017 capital plan.
Sure.
And that alone, it's way woefully insufficient today. So I think, you know, that one option is, there's difficulties with doing this, is going back and revisiting that.
I was just thinking the same thing and have an article to bring that 1 million to. Ooh,
Yeah,
but
the problem is
So,
there's some
don't they-
complications if you do that, if you open it up and it doesn't pass. then
Yeah.
Do you lose the existing million, you know what I mean?
Well, I think maybe it's the way you write the article,
Yeah,
an incremental million.
right, but my point though isn't the capital budget committee or whatever, don't they sit around and try to figure out what our needs are for the next 20 years? Like,
So it's
what is
actually
their,
the
what is their
permanent planning and
spreadsheet?
building committee.
Yeah,
so the
what is their
permanent planning is-
spreadsheet? And how does it differ from this? Why are we talking about roofs?
Well, the roofs are in the capital budget.
Everybody's talking about roofs. The capital budget committee's been talking about roofs, permanent planning and building committee's been talking about roofs, the school committee's talking about the roofs.
We're not talking about roofs, we're talking about how to finance the roof.
Right.
Right. And Arrow Street hasn't had a chance to come in to make a presentation on this yet. I've
Yeah.
had extensive conversations with Mike Quinlan, about when and where we're going to do that. You know, I think we've all been in a standstill since the Dale Street vote failed. Everybody is afraid to put forward an override.
Yeah.
We're afraid to put anything else on the tax rate because we're afraid the school is going to fail again. And it's gonna start to hurt us in other areas.
And this Arrow Street, it's based on priorities, not when it's practically feasible to do the projects.
right,
And there's a big difference between
right.
priority one and when they're feasible to be financed.
Exactly, and there's some electrification costs in there that you find are not feasible for us as well, so there's a lot of areas.
Yeah, if you dive into that report, there's big numbers on electrification, solar type stuff.
And that might not be financially feasible for us to make that transition on some of our existing buildings.
And so I
don't know.
piggybacking on your comment, and I understand it and I share it, you know, that we are, to use a better term, a worse term, concerned about bringing forward any override discussions. That's why I think that the Warrant Committee has a responsibility to bring it forward, because
Nobody likes us anyway.
nobody else is, well, that's what we do. We have to, you know, because otherwise, you know, you just dump it on the town administration. That's not
Yeah, but
what it
don't-
is. We
but
don't, we can work at it, you know, we have to find a solution. So
It's a
we have
joint
to,
effort from everybody.
exactly, but we have to define the problem before we can work on a solution.
But don't we have like a list
Addressing
of,
these,
What's that, Peter?
don't we have a list of all these other capital projects that I guess the capital budget committee has said, hey, here's what we're gonna do this year that are not
But
any of the
who
things
who
on
looks
this?
at that?
Oh,
What?
okay.
Who looks at the cost?
Wait, no, wait.
It's different.
No, Brent is here. He can, I'm sure, speak for the capital budget committee, but they've known about the roof. That's in the 20-year plan,
Right.
okay? So it's not like they don't know about it, right? I mean,
I'll speak for myself, but it's manifestly impossible, as we just described, to fund these projects.
Yeah.
at those amounts.
right,
Therefore, we choose not to even talk about it beyond the fact that it's necessary.
right.
Because what the money is there to fund the smaller things like the vehicles and.
You do
tennis course
what you
resurfacing.
can, right, with with
So,
the resources.
I think it's pretty clear that what we have now isn't going to cover the roofs at a minimum, among other things.
Right, right.
So if we can, so I think we need to come up with a strategy to finance it and bring that to the capital committee to say, okay, we gotta pull some of these things forward, like the roofs, because they keep on going out.
Well,
And the municipal building stabilization fund was set up so that we can pay principal and interest from that stabilization fund. But like Brent just said, we can't cover, principal and interest it shows in your slide, we
Yeah.
can't cover $19 million worth of that. I mean, we're doing everything we can to seek outside funding, that's why we're part of Green Community. We try to seek green community grants every year to take some of these things off the list.
yeah,
Because we know we can't do that with what we have existing for funding. But we're reaching that point where we still need to have all be in the same room, permanent planning and building, select board, school committee and warrant committee to have these conversations of how are we getting through the next 5 years?
yeah,
We can't just keep talking only about Dale Street.
right, right.
They have
No,
no rights. Well before Dale Street comes out.
we have to talk,
We have to begin.
walk and chew gum at the same time. I mean, it's,
Totally agree.
Say that.
Yeah, but
what was
shouldn't it
that,
be,
Bill?
I just said yes. I totally agree.
Yeah,
but shouldn't it be the capital budgets committee's responsibility to say, this is the capital needs of the town and we need help or something? I mean, like,
Yeah.
why, this is not, I don't agree that this is the warrant committee's job to sort of be like, hey, we have a problem here. Like, the whole point of having a capital budget planning committee is to be like, we got a lot of stuff we have to plan for.
Well, they know, they show it.
yeah, I don't,
And that's part of, I don't disagree with you, Peter, and that's part of why we undertook a new 20-year capital plan. And I think part of that falls under the permanent planning and building committee. They're the ones tasked with the 20-year building plan.
So you think,
I think Christine said it, I think accurately, that it needs to be,
All of
it's not one committee's responsibility. It's gotta be a group effort to
Yeah,
work through this.
when I say.
I mean, the school committee and the school department should be putting forward proposals to fix their roofs.
Exactly.
It's not-
Well, when I say the warrant committee's responsibility, I'm not saying it's warrant committee's responsibility to solve it. I'm saying it's the warrant committee, in my view, one man's opinion. It's our job one of our responsibilities would be to bring it forward and make this coalition happen.
Yeah.
But bringing the reality of it forward. I'm not saying it's our job to fix it. I'm saying it's our job to participate in the solution.
Yeah.
But it needs to be solved.
Well, the first step is talking about it.
Exactly.
Acknowledge
No, this is perfectly,
Yeah.
this is perfectly appropriate, but but like, it's, in the context, we gotta get people together so we can talk about the context, such as the Dale Street financing won't be for 3 years. So what do we have in in the interim?
Yeah,
No, not to talk about, I don't have a favorite.
maybe you don't need to do all of them. Maybe you could
Correct.
do one roof at a time.
Yeah, and the other piece is that, I'm not in favor of the, one proposal over another of what to do with that property. But what I will say is, we're never gonna build a 20,000 square foot
Right.
park and rec facility for 5, it's just not gonna happen. And I think we
Right.
can, and we know, looking forward, that we can say that,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
That's not gonna happen, okay? So I'm not, all over town.
For the record, modular is bigger than 900.
So we have several of those.
So I'm just saying, we can pick them off. Yeah, you're right.
What's your what's your thoughts, Brent?
Well, I mean, we have talked about and certainly looked at these terrifying numbers on the roofs, but if and I don't know when you talk about critical need versus nearly critical, whether it's possible to space out the roofs, but if it was possible, I mean, if it's a 20-year loan, but the roof has a lifespan of 30 years and you space them out, by the time 2 or 3 of these roofs come off the loan, off the debt service, you're back to replacing them again, which would suggest a long-term stabilization fund for that, where you're just paying every year.
Yeah,
in anticipation of constantly replacing the roofs on a cadence that seems to match,
yeah,
roughly speaking, the term of the loan. Because I don't know what else, because, to treat the roofs anyway as a one-off is probably not the right way to go. Whereas.
oh, I agree, no,
285 for 20 years and then we go back to life as normal. 10 years later, we'll be replacing it.
I think the other analysis that needs to be done, it's not, I'm not gonna do it, but maybe you can get a consultant to do it, is, these numbers are big. Go to, the priority 1, 2, and 3 by school. They're so big that
Right.
I think, yeah, this one, that, in my opinion, you look over on the right here, like it's $83 million. Okay, and the biggest one is the high school, but it's followed by the middle school and the Wheelock. So somebody has to do an analysis of do we want to spend $18 million on Wheelock when we know its useful life is going to be up in 20 years or 15 years? I don't know. I'm posing the question.
Right.
Right.
And some of these numbers are so big that, we know, or maybe somebody should look at, I hate to say this, Peter, but maybe combining a Dale Street with one of these schools and eliminate some of these costs.
Sure.
I was just thinking, as you were talking, that you would be a great person for the school building committee relating to Wheelock.
That's what I'll be in town then.
You're done,
I mean, I'm not feeling negative about the prospects for a Dale Street vote, but I'm not brimming with confidence about it.
Yeah, right.
that's wise.
And so, this could, if we go down again, we'll never get MSBA funding
Right,
for the rest of our lives.
right.
So that would be bad for that reason too, but I'm sorry, I'm just blathering here, but Dale Street's a pretty daunting thing. But this thing, this performance, I'm embarrassed, I didn't realize how bad this was, but you're right. Should I asked this with great trepidation, should I bring this up at the next SBC meeting? In sorts of different ways, I'm not to.
I think this is a great initial conversation. I think we need to let Arrow Street come in and make the presentation, so we can start having those conversations with a final plan.
Yeah.
Rather than the draft.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Great. We don't need to.
We don't need to get ahead
This
of
guy
it.
isn't falling, but there's information that we need to.
I agree,
Work on.
but I do want to point out that the PAF Center is the perfect example of what happens.
Yeah.
When we don't listen to what's been in the plan. I mean, the PAF Center has been in our plans for replacement since I got here in 1999.
Right.
So eventually, you're gonna have a PAF Center again. Right? So, well, I don't know if we need to address everything that Arrow Street is suggesting. We do have to keep the buildings at a point where they continue to function. I think we are moving in a great direction. We have this plan that'll be finalized. We have a brand new facilities director who is literally had to hit the ground running on a lot of projects. I think we have a lot. We've enlarged the size of the facilities department. We've gotten a project manager. I think we're moving in the right direction. We just need to figure out how.
And how to communicate it.
Yes,
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
without
communicate.
scaring everybody.
Exactly. Without scaring
I
you.
don't want anybody to think this conversation is to scare people about the Dale Street School.
Well, but
No, not at all. Not at all.
But I think there's also a more difficult element, which is if we believe that there's a certain burden per year over the next however many years this plan is, 20, whatever years, and we divide it, whatever the total number is, by 20, perhaps we need to say that operating budgets shouldn't go up by 2.5% plus new money plus override, whatever. And we should say appropriately, we should be planning for those because we have new capital costs that are coming over a 20-year timeline, such that our operating costs should not be rising at the same rate as we've been planning. And we should begin to plan out that way. I mean, we can't just be like, nobody wants to talk about this, and so we're going to have to do an override and be like, whatever. I mean, that's not that's not the way the planning should work.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, but I think that's certainly easier said than done, because when you have better than 80% of your operating budget as collective bargaining agreements, you are not gonna be able to level fund that.
Right.
Yeah, the 2.5% doesn't even work.
Right.
So, because we know even just on the school side, without doing anything, you're up almost 3.5% every year. So, and then with health insurance going up, so I think that's,
Right, but we don't have hiring freezes. We don't have any kind of freezes on anything.
I think
there's like-
essentially we have had a hiring freeze over the last few years. I mean, how many employees have we added?
Well, but I think, I don't disagree with that it's part of the conversation.
Yeah,
When we would say, okay, this is what costs we have that we have to deal with. These are the services that are provided. If you don't increase it by 2.5%, which is less than inflation, then you don't provide some of those services.
right.
And that again is what you communicate. Say, okay, we won't do this anymore. Whether it's the town doesn't do something with, they don't plow the streets, you got, shovel your own, or you just say, we're not gonna have a high school that's ranked
Yeah.
in the top 10 of the state. We'll just have to live with that and we'll cut back but from a practical point of view, that's what it comes down to.
Yeah, I mean,
We don't sit there going, oh my goodness, we're overspending and so we can just cut and it won't have any impact.
yeah,
It all is.
yeah. And the last thing I would say on this is that, as I think Pete Peterson pointed out, that we're ranked number 25 in terms of tax bills in the state. And I used to do that chart every year showing our ranking. And at one point we were, I think 15. Okay, and it's slowly, right after 2018, when we passed all the override. And we've gotten to 25 because we haven't done anything except pay off debt.
Do all this.
So there's gotta be a happy medium somewhere.
You gotta have some levity.
There's gotta be a happy medium somewhere. If we go into 50, everyone's property value is gonna go to the tank. So
Well, if all the roofs have fallen down in the schools, we're gonna,
yeah,
the town's gonna fall down too.
yeah.
That's why this is a good
All right.
conversation. It's time.
That's certainly been a length.
All right, so maybe let's see, what else do we have on the agenda do you have anything you wanted to bring up? Okay. Peter, speaking of schools, do you have anything on the school building committee?
Very, very little. I apologize. I had to miss the last meeting, whatever the first Wednesday was at 5. And so I wasn't physically present there. But I believe everyone is proceeding with the module. A lot of work is being done by the school department, Markov, Francesca, and others to prepare the materials. Everybody on the SBC, I think everybody in here knows that our quote window doesn't open until April 1. We can't submit documents to the MSBA now, even if we want to. That doesn't happen until April 1. Our goal is to get just about everything. Well, no, it's not just about. Our goal is to get everything in, a bunch in before town meeting, and then assuming town meeting votes to appropriate the additional 400,000, which God willing it will, then we'll have just about everything in. And we'll see whether the MSBA takes up our application to proceed to module 2 at its June 28, I think it is, meeting. We don't know. The MSBA is not obliged to do that. They put on their agenda what they want to put on their agenda. But at any rate, we're trying to move expeditiously.
Okay. Any questions from Pete? All right. Unless there's anything else,
Motion to adjourn.
second.
Second.
All right. Ed,
Yes.
Brent Nelson says yes.
Aye.
Steve Callahan's aye.
Peter Michelson, yes.
Pete Saldino, yes.
Jill Rafter,
you.
yes. Good
Okay,
discussion. Yeah, thank you.
thank you.
Thank you all.
Have a good
Thank
one,
you,
guys.
everyone.